All right, hello everyone. Hope everyone's had a great first day here at ACSM. My name is John Kindred, and I'm formerly coming off the Student Affairs Committee as the Rocky Mountain Chapter Rep. So today what we've got for you at the Student Colloquium is kind of a question and answer session with some of our experts on how to transition from students into becoming productive pieces of the workforce, both in academia as well as other research areas. So the way we really want to run this is to give you guys the opportunity to talk to some of our experts up here who are going to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes, to ask them questions about things that they're looking for. And you don't have to worry about, was my mentor going to find out about this? Or you get different perspectives from different regions of the country, as we're all pretty diverse up here. And with that, I'll go ahead and let the panel introduce themselves. We'll have a quick presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Hi, I'm Lanay. I am a program officer at NIH. I'm actually the training officer for my specific institute, and so I can answer a lot of questions on career development awards as well as training awards for pre and postdoc and early career.
I'm Barry Braun. I'm the professor and a department head at Colorado State University in Health and Exercise Science. And I'm not sure exactly which things are my areas of expertise, but as John knows, you can pretty much ask me any question and I'll pretty much tell you exactly what's on my mind with no filter. So if that's helpful.
Great. Oh, I can use this one too. Hi, I'm Jen Sacheck. I'm an associate professor at the Friedman School of Nutrition at Tufts in Boston. I guess similarly, like my area of expertise would be knowing what it's like to do a master's degree, look for a job, do a PhD, look for a job, do a postdoc, look for a job, apply for grants, get accepted or rejected, and also be recruited by corporate America, and sort of how to sort of filter that in the midst of things and trying to figure out which path to go along.
All right, so I have a very brief presentation, and then we're going to open up to just general questions and answers. But I was asked to talk specifically about the loan repayment program to you guys because we feel that by and large, a lot of people don't realize that NIH will repay your loans, provided a few conditions are met. So I wanted to very briefly give you the overview of the program. And I did bring some handouts on it as well, so don't be shy afterwards to come and grab the handouts if it's something that you're interested in. So just to give you guys an overview of the National Institutes of Health, since I think it's a mixed crowd, on the pinwheel here is the 27 different institutes and centers that make up the National Institutes of Health. And each of those ICs has a different mission and vision associated with it, and will fund different types of research. So it's really important to find the right IC to fund the research you want to do later on, as well as the loan repayment program. So I just wanted to throw up this overview slide of the different types of training and career development awards that are possible through the National Institutes of Health. And you can see we fund students from undergraduate through, like I said, early career faculty awards, and the loan repayment program can start as a postdoc. So that's what I'm going to talk about. The loan repayment program, the way it works is that you basically commit to doing research at least part-time, so at least 50% of your time for the next 2 years. And provided that your application is successful, NIH will repay up to $35,000 a year of your qualified educational debt and cover the federal taxes associated with making those payments. And our goal here is to increase the stock of people who stay in research. So we know that having a lot of loan debt can be a real barrier to staying in research. And so to be eligible for the LRP, you need to have your terminal degree, so a PhD or an MD or equivalent. You need to be a US citizen or permanent resident. As I said, committing to participating or conducting research for at least 20 hours a week, and having an educational loan debt that's at least 20% of your annual income. And then Your research funding position must be funded by a nonprofit or a university or a government organization. You do not have to have an NIH grant to be eligible. You could just be conducting research that your university is helping you pay for, and you'd be eligible for this award. There are 5 different LRP programs that are listed here. The most common are the top 2, the clinical research program or the pediatric research program. So when you submit an application for the loan repayment program, you have to describe the type of research you're going to be doing over the next 2 years. And you submit your application to a specific institute or center out of those 27 different ones that I put up on the slide at the beginning. And so it's really important to determine which mission fits your research area the best. If you go to the website, they have actually a scroll menu that goes through all of the different ICs and lists out what their mission is, as well as the contact person at that IC that you can email and say, this is my idea, does it fit with your IC, and would you be interested in getting a loan repayment application from me? And so my name is listed there as I'm the contact information for contact person for my particular IC. So in summary, there are 5 different programs that you can choose from. They will repay up to $70,000 total over 2 years of educational loan repayment, as well as the taxes. You get a 2-year initial contract. You can keep reapplying until all of your loan debt is paid off. So as soon as you are accepted the first time around, you can keep reapplying for a renewal until it pays off all of your loan debt. And very few people know about this, and so the success rate is actually at 50% overall, which is really good for NIH. So I definitely recommend applying if you have loan debt. And so the deadline is November 15th, and you can go to the website lrp.nih.gov for more information. So thanks.
Since I'll be graduating soon, if you guys forget all that, this is my chances. That'd be great. So now we're just really going to open up the questions for you guys on what you kind of expect after you graduate when you're looking for a job, whether that be a job as a PhD student or a postdoc or looking for faculty advisement, anything like that. Please feel free to step up to the mics and ask our panel. And then if you guys are a little too shy, I have some questions I can start off with.
If you have a crossover between those categories, like pediatric and infertility, does that increase your chance of getting accepted?
You'd have to choose one specific program to apply for, and so it'd be good to talk to a program officer about which program would fit you best. The infertility one only is supported by the National Institute for Child Health and Development. The pediatric one, is supported by multiple ICs, so that might increase your chances if you apply to that one, because multiple ICs could select your application to fund.
Hi, Louise from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. So I don't know how dire the funding situation is in the States, but in Canada it depends on the type of grant you're applying for, but some of the success rates are as low as 10%. And I know that I've been promised that the baby boomers are going to be retiring soon, but I haven't really seen that yet. So I find I'm doing my PhD and I'm looking at future jobs down the line, and the first thing I'm noticing is that I feel like there's few opportunities for professorships, and then on top of it, few opportunities for grants. And so I'm just wondering if I were lucky enough, I guess, to get a professorship position, I'm sort of thinking down the road, is it what are your opinions on maybe mixing with industry, and if it's beneficial? I know that the traditional track is get a PhD, get a postdoc, get a professorship. But I'm wondering that given the dire situation with granting agencies, if there's any sort of changing perspective on combining industry and sort of working in industry and then moving into a professorship and how that's looked upon, or if you have any ideas on that.
So just speaking from having recruited my current postdoc to stay on as a research assistant professor and trying to convince her that she doesn't need to take a professorship that is a liberal arts 9-month teaching position because she's so worried and sees me frantically applying for grants, I would say the first thing is, I think everybody's aware here and other places that it's challenging, but I think that's going to inherently narrow the pool of potential people that want to stay on and deal with that environment. I think, secondly, if you have any interest in doing research, I would stay the course until you fail. I mean, you're not going to fail. If you can do it, you can do it. Like, I think, why not try? And that's what I tried to convince this particular person to stay on. She got the announcement today that, she's a research assistant professor and she's gung-ho. And I think it's keeping that positive outlook. I think all of us like to think of the glass half full, but having to increase our portfolio, I think NIH and, government funding is looked upon, and several foundations, obviously, too, American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, but universities like the large overhead. So if some of you don't know what overhead is, it's that's paying for the lights and the photocopying in your office and your computers, things that we all need to get an MBA for that, we probably should be told that you need an MBA sometimes to run an NIH grant. But I think that, that is nice for universities, but now they're recognizing that we have to be more strategic in our partnerships. I think foundations, local foundations, those partnerships actually are great and feel hugely ethical. I think partnering with some very reputable industry, corporations also can be great. And I think this is where you just make very smart decisions on what is on your CV or resume. And, are the standards that they have in place for research and yours similar? Because I think people are opening their minds now and not poo-pooing as much, at least in my vein. I've tried to stay out of industry work, but, there's some, definitely ones that I totally consider if they were the right project that fit, my research interests. And of course, when you're junior, I think just being very careful to, you're not able to be as selective, sometimes because you're just like, I need the support, so I'm going to go ahead and go for it. But trying to have a little bit of a filter, might go a long way too. So I think it's just stay the course if you're interested. And, it's bad right now, and I don't think it can get worse. So, hopefully there will be an uptick, and I can commiserate. It's tough, but, I'm still sitting here, with the academic day job.
So I think that's true, but I also think what's changed in the last 5 to 8 years is a greater respect for industry partnerships and a greater value that universities place on them. So it's possible to go back and forth now in a way that I don't think was at all possible before. And there's new opportunities. So I have a postdoc right now. She's spending 1.5 years with Pfizer Pharmaceutical in Cambridge and then 1.5 years with us at CSU. So it's a 3-year postdoc. She's going to have 1.5 years in industry, 1.5 years in academia. And best part for me, Pfizer pays everything: salary, fringe, travel, experimental costs. So there's some opportunities to do things with industry that we can't do otherwise.
Yeah, and to his point, like taking a job with industry, yeah, I think you can go back and forth like you could before. They said if you leave, now I know even at Tufts we're recruiting professor of practice, right? People who've been out there and they have a special skill set that they want to bring in to train like those master's level students who want to go out into the workforce and get those types of jobs. So that is completely different. I think it's research funding, as long as it's not too biased and you can control it, that's great. But it definitely, I think, we are all thinking differently about that going back and forth. I know that even when I graduated with my PhD, I was offered an industry job, but I was, and I was like, I think it was only last year that I made that salary. No, I'm joking, it wasn't that bad, but it was pretty bad. But, I was so worried about leaving that I wasn't even gonna risk it. But at the same time, interviewing for those jobs, and going out there, I think if you've had your head down, as a student for a long time, and you only kind of know academia at that point, it's so good to get out there and see the potential opportunities and see, get that perspective and meet other past academics that now work in industry and have very happy and fulfilling lives.
And I'll just chime in from the funding side that NIH is really committed to growing the biomedical workforce and offers a range of programs to help people stay in academia. The loan repayment program is just one of those, but we have a lot of other awards that, you know, are more limited competition so that you're not competing against full professors, you're competing against other postdocs and other early career. So typically the pay lines for those are a little bit easier. However, we recognize that it's a tough environment, and NIH as a whole is continuing to look at different policies. And one thing that's been in place for a while is that if we want to continue to fund somebody who has over $1 million in funding, we have to give a very clear justification for why they should get more when we could be funding a new investigator, right? And we're actually considering some changes to that to actually try to open up more money to take away from individuals who, you know, maybe should be retiring soon. You know, it would really affect just a very small percentage of current investigators, but could potentially provide enough funds to have, like I think they said, 1,400 new R01 level awards to younger stage, earlier stage investigators. And so NIH is trying to balance that out and create more opportunities for young investigators, because we recognize it's hard to stay in the game if you can't get funding.
Hi guys, I'm Tessa. I'm from UNLV. My PhD is actually in interdisciplinary health sciences. I switched from kinesiology to interdisciplinary health sciences for the purpose of my passion about incorporating lifestyle medicine into the medical field, is why I switched. I have a husband who is a physician, and you go hand in hand with them through medical school. And I know what he knows and doesn't know about health and wellness through his education. And so what I'm finding, though, as I get close to graduation is that even though my emphasis is in exercise physiology, when looking at academic positions, I'm at this kind of limbo of people where I don't really fit into the XPhys faculty category, but I don't fit into a medical school faculty category, so I'm kind of in limbo. I'm just wondering what your suggestions might be on kind of marketing that, or, I mean, I know where ACSM is headed, I know where the medical field is headed. I've worked in primary care as a health coach, so I'm just not quite sure how to best market that when looking at faculty positions, or even if faculty position is the best way to go. So,
I have a couple of thoughts on that. First, I think you're in what I'd say a hot field, right? And you've sort of positioned yourself for that. I think that what I learned, I have a master's in exercise science, a PhD in nutrition science, but focus on exercise physiology. I now sit in a school of nutrition, but I feel like I'm the one holding up the exercise physiology and physical activity sign. So I sometimes feel very uncomfortable that I don't fit, right? But I think sometimes that I don't fit makes me special and unique and a resource too. So I want you to think about, if there's not a perfect fit, that's probably a good thing, that people might be looking for someone like you, with that sort of cross-disciplinary approach. And I also think there's a lot of institutes that are sort of popping out, in conjunction with health clinics, hospitals, universities that are focused on prevention, wellness, lifestyle, institutes, that sort of thing. So just sort of think outside of the box a little bit in terms of maybe it's not traditional faculty. Let's say there's, Institute of Lifestyle Medicine in Boston, and it's affiliated with a hospital. To have a position there, but be an adjunct even at a local university, and maybe if you want to teach or do research, to keep your sort of feet wet in multiple areas. I think diversifying for some, and having a lot of doctoral students sort of going out right now into the field that are sort of in that the MUT area, that they can kind of do a lot of different things and spin their CVs a lot of different ways. Suggesting not to close any doors, but sort of to think sort of innovatively like that, and it might really carve a unique career path for you along the way.
So similarly, I have a hybrid background as well in terms of a master's in exercise science and a PhD in nutrition. And I have a PhD in nutrition, but I'm the head of a Health and Exercise Science Department. At our university, the head of the nutrition department has a PhD in exercise physiology. So, these things are not that hardwired. I think the point that I would add on to is hard money jobs in medical schools are almost impossible for a PhD. I mean, you either see patients in the clinic or you bring in your own salary through research funds. But in terms of somebody actually paying you 100% or even more than 50% of a salary without it coming from you or you working in the clinic as a physician, they're pretty few and far between.
Yeah, I guess I'll chime in too. I also have a cross-disciplinary background in exercise physiology as well as epidemiology. And prior to being a program officer, I was an assistant professor at Michigan State University. And when I applied for that job, I considered asking for a dual appointment to 2 different departments. And I was really counseled away from that because, one, that means you have to meet tenure requirements in 2 different departments or figure out which department is my tenure home and make sure that the other department agrees, and that can be really difficult. And 2, that's a lot more service requirement and et cetera to be meeting as a young faculty member. So it's useful often, even with the cross-training, to have a home, and that didn't mean I couldn't collaborate with the other department, and I did collaborate with the other department, but my home was in kinesiology while I was assistant professor, and that helped to keep me on the pathway towards tenure. So.
I would just add very quickly, I would be very, very wary of a dual appointment as a young faculty member. Really, really wary. Everybody thinks that they own you.
Yeah.
Hi, Tanya Halliday, University of Colorado. I'm postdoc there. I'm my first year. So I've heard rumors about the NIH placing a cap on indirects. Can you speak to that? And then could both of you speak to how that might change your requirements or preference for NIH grants or what you would expect from your faculty?
Be careful of what you hear in rumors. So yeah, I've heard that as well, that is a proposal for how to deal with potential budget cuts. All I can say at the moment is that the administration will propose a budget, which has been released. Congress actually has to pass a budget. And there's a lot of bipartisan support for NIH in Congress, so what's been proposed likely will not completely reflect what actually gets passed. If you are concerned about it, please contact your congressman. But certainly that, the capping indirects has been proposed as one way of dealing with that, but at this point, all it is a rumor and a suggestion. There's nothing set, and I know as much as you do about it.
Yeah, I would agree that I don't, not sure we're going to see that come to fruition. It sounds like more of a soundbite than a reality. But and if you believe our research administration, if that happens, a hole will open, the university will fall in, the ground will close, and nothing will ever emerge again. And I'm sure that's not the reality. And you can also see a little bit of an upside that if the indirect rate for us it's 52% goes down, then it starts to make industry funding more competitive in terms of seeming like a viable alternative. So there's always a bit of an upside. But yeah, I can't read the tea leaves. I don't see this happening.
Yeah, ditto. I feel like even if it went down, we're 65%. So I know some of the hospitals I've worked with are like 80%. So in some ways, I could see that be a good way to make some cuts, but it still wouldn't even become close, even if we're cut in half to like the foundations are typically 10%, indirect. And then, it would be nice, as I'm not an MBA, a business professional, but if it were somewhat similar across the road, it'd be nice to put effort into the foundation work, but not have to sort of hide, not hide, but put in extra line items for extra computers to sort of offset the lack of indirect. I'm thinking IRB staff and that sort of thing that, we're working with the NIH, it's very clear, it's comfortable, I know, and it's comfortable for the institution. But I think it's actually on the other side, it'd be nice that, working with foundations and industry, it was a little bit more seamless. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm Diego Arguello. I'm a doctoral student at Northeastern University's Population Health Program. I was curious to know what kind of early investigator career opportunities there are at the NIH.
For what level?
PhD.
PhD. So as a postdoc, there are several K awards that can be applied for as long as you have a permanent position, that your chair would write a letter and say that you have a permanent position. There's also
You
the
define permanent,
Yeah.
for him.
Huh?
Define permanent.
a full-time position that would last the length of the award at least. And so you have to have a letter of support to qualify for those K awards. So typically, senior postdocs or assistant profs are applying for those Ks. For other postdoc level awards, the individual F32 supports a postdoc experience. That doesn't actually give you research dollars, that supports you on your postdoc. And so typically you have to find additional funding from your mentor to actually conduct a research experiment. And the other option would be an institutional training award, the T32 program. So these already exist. They're at different universities across the United States, and you would apply directly to that university for their T32 program and become an appointed trainee. Again, that supports you, not necessarily the research that you're doing. But typically those programs have a lot of faculty members that are part of the mentor team, and they have a lot of projects that the T32 trainees work on. So those are all options. The T32, you don't apply to NIH. The others, you do apply directly to NIH. So I think T32s are a great way to go, at least to get started, because it's a little bit less competitive to actually get the funding. And then oftentimes what happens is once you're on a T32, in the first couple years, you write an F32 or a K and get additional funding and training through those mechanisms.
Hi, my name is Alejandra. I am from Mexico, so I am an international student at Oklahoma State University. And every time someone asks me what I'm going to do after I finish, I honestly don't know. Because, and here is my question, is it an obstacle being an international student to be hired whenever you are watching at the CV of a person? Is being an international makes it harder for the institution to hire that person? Is it an obstacle, or is it something that might help me in some way?
I guess since I'm someone who hires people as faculty members, I could answer that. It's pretty seamless. I mean, basically it doesn't count against anyone. It's pretty easy to hire people who are international. I mean, there's hoops to jump through, but the university has seen this before. It's not like you would be the first international person to ever get a faculty position. So, it is a little harder. There are some hoops. There's some money that has to be spent up front, but it's not, I don't see it, at least at our university, it certainly has never deterred me at all. And I've now hired a couple of international faculty, and you like the idea that it brings a broader perspective. In our case, one of our faculty is from China, and it's actually opened up a phenomenal relationship with the China Institute of Sports Sciences that we'd never have otherwise. So I don't see it as a negative at all.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that at least at our school, like diversity and we're dealing with world issues is big. So we've definitely brought on a lot of research assistant professors. Actually, one that I can think of right now, she is going up for research associate professor. She's gotten an R01. She actually lives in Greece most of the time, but it's amazing what she is doing, here in the States. I mean, obviously she's doing less teaching, mentoring of students, but working very closely with other junior faculty and postdocs. So it's been very rewarding. I think we would love to see her, more here. I mean, it depends on obviously your life and your research interests, but she also has a major collaboration in Greece, so it makes a lot of sense to work there. But we see it across the board, and I think that I haven't hired personally, and I'm sure there's some hoops to jump through, but I wouldn't let that hinder you in any way. I think that what I've seen when I was a postdoc, I was in a lab that was, I think I was the only US citizen in the lab out of like 12 postdocs. And what I saw is there wasn't a clear definitive end for them. And they came to work at this institution and work with this mentor. And that was hard because they didn't know when to say it was enough, and they were worried because they weren't getting teaching experience, and they wanted to be at a state school or a university where they could actually teach, but not getting in that experience. So I think just as long as you're positioning yourself well, and if you're in a postdoc position, knowing with your mentor like sort of when the right time is to sort of move on and not sort of be beholden to being in the lab and work. In that case, it was a lab, to that sort of scenario, and to have those conversations up front.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Kate Courtney. I'm a doctoral student at Colorado State in the nutrition department. And I'd actually like to talk a little more about non-academic jobs. So I'm potentially interested in transitioning into government or public health or maybe industry. And I'd like to hear more about your experience being recruited by industry, but also how to, get connected with industry and also tailor a CV from an academic background to work in an industry job, potentially.
Sorry.
You want to go? Go for it.
All right, I'll start a little bit, and I have a little experience with industry, and I've worked with a few companies for a while, and have a good reasonable understanding of the things they're looking for that are different in some way, and how to write a CV and how to get connected. Part of the nice thing about especially the pharmaceutical industry is the first job is really hard to get. The second, third, and fourth jobs are really easy to get because people move horizontally constantly, and you're constantly headhunted for the next job. But the first job is tough, and it's almost impossible to do without knowing somebody. And so that's where I think the networking thing, we always talk about networking. It's especially important there because without some entree, it's pretty hard to get that first job. And that's also a person who can help you navigate how do you write the CV in a way that's going to be tailored to what they're looking for? How do you interview in a way that's tailored to what they're going to be looking for? It is somewhat different. I mean, we're all looking for enthusiastic people who want to be there and are really hardworking and all those other things. But there's also, I think, a style to industry that is a little bit different than what we're used to, a little more product oriented, a little less process oriented. So that's sort of an important thing to have inside information on.
Results driven.
Yes.
And I'm thinking back to when I was in that period in a postdoc where I wanted to be an academic and really was wanting to explore all options and looked at industry. And I think, with the pharmaceutical side, I definitely had those connections. I'm thinking about Novartis. I knew someone there, got in the door right away to speak with somebody in the diabetes unit. And, realizing pretty quickly, what the first job would look like and being realistic about that. But then if you can get a sense and maybe get over that first job and maybe what the tiers above are to see if that's for you, I think that's really important. Again, the insider thing and schmoozing or whatever you call it makes a lot of sense. But also, I also was recruited by the food industry, and there they actually were interested in some of the research I had done, so that was nice. I went and presented an academic presentation, but then I quickly realized, the results that were, results driven, and I could be put on salad dressing one week, loaded with vitamin C, and then the next week it was like, macaroni and cheese. But, so I knew that wasn't for me, but it was I think being in academia for a long time, you are process oriented. It was fascinating to sort of figure out what type of individual I had become. And even though I'm competitive in results, that it's a little uncomfortable for me to make a decision right that second on something that's going to be millions of dollars or impact thousands of lives very quickly. So again, I think really thinking about that and then crafting your CV too. I think you also have to have somewhat of a corporate savvy, I think, or something. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely they appreciate someone who's been well trained in academia, I'd say.
And I would just add on that there are a lot of jobs you don't think about that your PhD prepares you for in a lot of different ways. And part of it is just realizing how the experiences you've had as a doctoral student, as a postdoc, how they can be translated to different situations. And so, you know, for an example, when I was applying to NIH for a job, I called up a couple of program officers there and said, what's the application process like? How do I answer these questions? They're really weird questions about, you know, have I ever enacted a policy and things like that. And they said, yeah, you know, think about all the committee work you've done as an academic and how that translates. You know, how did you actually get something passed through a committee within your institution and how that might translate to the next level in government. And so sometimes it takes some creative thinking about how the experiences you've had already actually do prepare you for perhaps a different career trajectory than you had envisioned when you started. But, you know, I would say keep your mind open. Academia is wonderful. I loved my job as an assistant prof, but I also love my job as a program officer. And, you know, there's a lot of great positions at NIH. Extramurally, you know, I get to talk with people like you all the time and advise them on which type of funding opportunity they should apply for and how they should structure their aims to match our IC priorities. I also get to write funding announcements and decide, you know what, I think the next thing that we really need in this line of research is better measurement of whatever. And so we need to write a funding opportunity announcement to fund research on better measurement. So that's exciting, but there are also different jobs at NIH, at CDC, at local health departments that really need academics in them and people who understand science and understand evidence-based and, you know, really how to design something rigorous. And so just thinking broadly about those opportunities. Also at NIH, you can work intramurally. We have an intramural research program that you know, has its own tenure track. So it's very similar to academia, but you are located at NIH and all your research is done and funded intramurally. So that's also an option.
And I just want to add on one thing to dovetail on what you, Lanay, mentioned about skill set, is that, you know, if you're, you know, you step back and you want to consider both academia and industry or corporate America, or however you want to phrase it, you know, I'm thinking about one of my doctoral students who's well-skilled in her doctoral work and her dissertation work, dealing with social media, communications, obviously a foundation in nutrition and exercise physiology. You know, she has been hired as the chief development officer for a company. Because, you know, it happened to be someone she met in a gym because she's physically active, who found out about her skill sets. And, you know, I think it is just, it's funny what you do in research, and you're like, oh my gosh, that actually is very translatable to another position. In this instance, somebody discovered her, but, you know, she's like, wow, you know, I actually can do this really well and it's, you know, at first she's like, I'm not using my degree, you know. Yeah, well, yes, you are. It's all those skills you had attained, and you just have to think a little different spin on it.
And I'd also say make sure to talk with people in the positions that you're considering to really be sure that that's something that you want to do day in and day out. Because, you know, jobs can look very different on paper than they are in experience. And we know that, right? That's why we have internship programs and all the rest. But, you know, as you get older, perhaps doing a 3-month internship isn't a possibility anymore. So at least have some phone calls with a couple people and get a good understanding of what the job is really like.
And can I just add to that, because that's a life thing, talking to a lot of my students and others that I mentor about transitioning from the PhD to the postdoc to the first job. At a certain point, your life matters, okay? I know you can follow the job for a certain point and, you know, relationships, family, beaches versus mountains, all that stuff, you know, comes to play. You know, at some point you probably will settle down a little bit. And life does become important. So there's a time where maybe you don't want that to impact your decisions, but there is a time then where you really should, because you want to be also happy in your outside life just as much as you are in your work life. So that work-life balance, you know, depending on how you look at it, you know, is also equally as important.
I'll also mention that there are some resources out there like USA
I am Trey Brindle, doctoral student at Drexel University. Thank you for this program and for all the advice that you're giving. I've been curious about something. So you're interested in research and you're looking at the options. You have academia and industry, which is common. I wonder if you all have ever heard of any success coming from an entrepreneurship, a way of monetizing the skills that you learned as a PhD in a way that could create new research, but also provide a service. Just something I've been curious about. I haven't heard anything about that in the past, so I'm just wondering if you guys have come across that at all.
So NIH does have specific award programs. They're called SBIR and STTR. Funding opportunities for individuals who have a small business or want to start a small business based on a research product that they are developing or have developed. So certainly they're interested in supporting that entrepreneurship and really speeding that kind of research to market transition, because that can be a really long process. So, for example, from my IC, we have funded work on somebody who has developed scripts for people to use when they're trying to get a clean MRI scan. And you need to lay still, and people have a lot of anxiety, and so they're fidgeting. So they have these kind of mindfulness scripts because of my IC that we're in complementary and integrative health, right? So we fund a lot of research on mindfulness. Well, she wants to now market those scripts and create an app around that. And so that she can, sell straight to market instead of selling to the hospitals. And so we're funding that work, and we're funding her small business to speed up that app development process. So that's one way that NIH at least is contributing towards that entrepreneurship kind of avenue. And that's just one example. There are a lot of different examples of different SBIR and STTR type of awards.
So I think, and you may say this as well, you're running a small business no matter what you're doing, right? So that entrepreneurial skills, being able to go out and assess the landscape, what's needed out there, what's not being delivered, and how can I fill that gap, regardless of whether you're working in industry, with industry, or running a government-funded lab, those skills are always valuable and absolutely necessary. And certainly when we interview people are looking for that in people, is not just, I'm going to get an RO3 and then I'm going to follow that up with an RO1 and then I'm going to, we want people who are seeing a bigger, broader, more varied landscape than that and are thinking about ideas they have that, might work for an SBIR, might work for an RO3, but also might be valuable to the shoe industry because they've got an idea for a high heel that is going to actually be comfortable and look fabulous. Which is a $1 billion idea, by the way. So I think, those entrepreneurial skills and demonstrating an entrepreneurial skill set is always, and I think getting more and more valuable all the time.
Yeah, and I agree completely that I don't know when it was, how many years ago, I picked up my head, I'm like, oh my God, I'm running a small business. I am these grants and then hiring a project team and executing, having creative ideas, and then trying to maintain that is, I'm like, I should have my own business. But on the other side, I think, I know at Tufts that we are heavily thinking about, impact, and with that, thinking about entrepreneurship. And we've started an entrepreneurship class within our school for graduate students this past year, so that, people can think, really how entrepreneurship might look on paper, which I can't explain, and, insights and envisions. And I think that maybe people historically might think of entrepreneurship in a lab and, coming up with a technique, but really also social entrepreneurship and developing these not-for-profit organizations. A lot of people that are ending with a master's degree even, that, thinking about starting their own jobs. And I think it's heavily, heavily valued now. And so much for also with diversifying our research portfolios and income portfolios at universities, entrepreneurship is something that we are now considering more of. It's amazing how many people on the outside that are coming in to learn about our skill sets so that we can collaborate on entrepreneurial endeavors. So it's definitely a skill and that people should focus on and think about.
My name is Gordon. I'm from the University of Pittsburgh. I'm a recent graduate from the PhD program. So my question is that what would be a good keyword when you are searching for a postdoc position? So I tried the postdoctoral fellow on the highereducation.com, and I only have like a handful of results. So I was wondering if I'm doing something wrong. Thanks.
Oh, I feel like there's no great place to look for them, although I haven't looked in a while, full disclosure. I feel like it's a lot of word of mouth with, faculty to other faculty they know that are in similar areas of, expertise or disciplines, such that I have a postdoc position open and I know I'd love to have these skills based on my current funding and to sort of fill those slots. So I'd reach out to people that I know who are doing similar work. So I feel like I've looked in that way as opposed to necessarily posting. And unfortunately, that is sort of a networking endeavor that maybe some of your prior mentors can sort of feel that out a little bit for you. And I think even for me, when I was looking for a postdoc, again, it was not traditional. It was like, why don't you talk to this person? Why don't you talk to this person? Sort of the cities I was interested in living in and with, types of research that I was interested in pursuing. So I think, also reaching out to people individually is not a bad thing that you're interested in working with.
I'll be really short. I've never been involved in a situation where getting or giving a postdoc that wasn't a personal relationship, ever, not once.
So I guess the other thing I'd add on to that is depending on your research area, there are likely T32 programs that are funded, and you can, say you're interested in heart disease. You can go to NHLBI's website, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and on their website, they will have a listing of all of their currently funded T32 programs, and they should have links to those individual programs. I think most of our web pages do. And you can look at that list of programs to see which ones have slots available. And that's another way of finding, postdoc positions that are available in a given research area that for sure have funding available. And then you'd have to go through the application process with that school. And obviously you'd want to call them up and talk to them and, make sure it's a good fit for you, because the fit between you as the mentee and the mentor as the postdoc mentor, that's really key to having a good experience. So you don't want to just find a postdoc to find one. That personal relationship is really important, and making sure it matches what you really want to do. But I think it's not a bad idea to look for the T32 programs. It's also not a bad idea to see, okay, so who's funded in the area of science that I'm interested in? You can go on NIHreporter.gov and find out who's funded in a given area and start to try to build relationships with them and see if they would be interested in having a postdoc work with them. But having a personal connection somehow through a mentor or a past mentor, I think that's really key to opening the door for those types of relationships. I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, so that's another one, IRACDA, and it's 25% research, 25% teaching postdocs. There's not that many of them in the country, but there are some, and that's another factor.
So likely not all ICs participate in that, and that's why but certainly, that's a great resource as well.
All right, my name is Paul Acosta from Lindenwood, and I'm just graduating from master's. And one of the topics that got me to here with you guys was salary negotiation. I was just wondering how to handle it, and moving on, what is your guys' opinion on it?
So I can speak to that at the faculty level. So, we negotiate. I encourage people to negotiate. I especially encourage women to negotiate and tell them that I don't think, or, we have evidence that, women tend not to negotiate as well or as much as they should. So I always tell people, do your homework, figure out what people in these positions get paid at reasonably similar universities, and propose something to me. And negotiate hard. And you're probably going to lose because I'm pretty good at this, but do it. Practice it. And I think the practice is important. So there are people at our university, I'll just bring this up quickly, who actually encourage women to send back food at restaurants to just practice the skill of negotiating. And I don't think that's terrible advice because, it matters because that first salary will follow you for the rest of your career. In terms of each time you get a percentage on top of that, you really do need to try and get it right, right up front.
Yeah, I'll second that. That I brought in a postdoc a couple years ago, and I fought for a higher postdoctoral salary simply because I knew that was sort of her starting point. And if she was going to stay at our institution, I know what it's like to start at a certain salary and not negotiate up. And sometimes you really want the job, and you don't, like, if I can just get my foot in the door, but that will haunt you again for years to come if your salary is low. And being a woman, I have to say that I definitely negotiated damn hard for my first car with that sales car salesman, and got a great deal. But translating that to the workplace and getting that self-doubt, or maybe I'm not as good, let it go. I mean, everybody in here should be somewhat competitive. You're at ACSM, so I think everybody's got a little bit of drive in them. But, I think people inherently do respect you more. Don't wait to get mad about hearing about some major inequity to go in the door. And, I mean, I've had that experience. I find something out, I'm like, are you kidding me? And then you feel undervalued, taken advantage of, and maybe that's not the case. Or like, hey, she just never asked for more. You just don't want to be in that situation. So start as high as you can, and let that be your baseline.
And once they've offered you the job, they want you, right? And so you can negotiate once the offer is on the table. They're not going to, all of a sudden rip the offer out because you said, hey, I'd like to consider a higher salary. They might say no, and we're going to renegotiate down to a different salary, but they're not going to say, oh, well, no, it's no longer on the table at all, most likely.
Yeah. No, I would amplify that. Once we've identified the finalist, that's the person I want. I don't want the second person. I don't want the third person. Yeah. That's the one I want. No matter what you negotiate, it's not going to change the fact that you're the person I want.
Government jobs are different, though. You don't get the opportunity to negotiate salary so much for starting your government job. You can negotiate how many steps you get to increase each year and speed up your raise and career ladder, but the starting salary is not as negotiable as an academic salary.
And I think also having learned being in the same institution, I've been back at Tufts for 12 years, my ability to potentially, amplify or increase my salary might have benefited from a couple of moves in the interim, because clearly I could go out and negotiate if I got recruited or, was hired somewhere else. I could negotiate up, and I could see that with the people that recruited in, like, oh, we don't want the faculty to get upset because we recruited these people and their salary is a little bit higher. So that's just another thing to think about. If you've been somewhere for a couple of years and you're open to change, that will also help. Yeah.
So along those lines, when it comes to negotiating, it seems like we're always just hoping, at least in our position, we're hoping, let's go for the average. Like, at least I get average. They're not underpaying me at that point. But let's say we get offered the average salary or right in that range. How offended might a hiring position person be if we come back in and say, okay, then that tells me you think that I'm average, and why do you want to hire somebody that's average? Or that tells me that you think you're an average university or company. So is that an appropriate way to navigate things?
So having been in exactly this situation, I, at one point, in a faculty meeting, mentioned to the faculty that although they were saying they were underpaid, that according to our peer institutions, they were actually right there competitive with all the other R1 institutions like ours. The response I got was, are you saying that you want us to be average? And the answer is that's a great point. I don't want you to be average. And so I was not offended. I actually took it as a challenge to try and, bring up the salaries to the point that they wouldn't feel like I was trying to make them be average. I can't say that everybody feels that way. It might offend people. It certainly didn't offend me because I don't want them to be average. And if that matters, then that's my responsibility.
I'm not sure how to respond to that question. I mean, I think the only time I've been offended by a really high salary is when it's a job that's ridiculously different than the salary that they're requesting. And then that's just, sort of funny. But otherwise, you take it seriously. And I think also there's some institutions that might think, oh, everybody wants to come here so we can get away with, sort of lower salaries. And I won't ever name names, but it does exist. So, I think that is a prime place to actually fight for a little higher salary. But it is, I think we are fighting the averages, and, you'll hear that a lot, but that's, across the university, that's the average salary of, and you're like, well, great, I'm average, so it's difficult, as I'd say, yeah.
Hi. So we're talking a bit about salary. I guess I was going to ask about like the other stuff, the other extras. What other stuff do you think is important as far as like startup costs for your research, or what other things, if salary doesn't seem as negotiable, do you think are where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, trying to see if you can get some cushion somewhere else?
So I guess since I'm in this position regularly, I'll give you my party line first, which doesn't always work, as I tell people. A huge startup package is great, but you can't put a price on a supportive department head and great coworkers. That really doesn't work very well. People don't really buy that. But there's some areas where I think there's really high value. So one of the things, I was just talking to somebody about this, is people ask for travel costs to meetings. I love giving people travel costs to meetings. First of all, it's good for the university. It shows off their research. It helps them meet people and network. It's good for their students. It allows them to start to create a portfolio of things they've done, like be part of a symposium or organize a symposium. I'll pay that all day long, 5, 6, and it's minimal money. I mean, they're talking about thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that stuff is easy. Ask for the moon in that, because I'll give you that. So there's things like that, whereas, the $400,000 piece of equipment, that's going to be a tough sell unless you have 4 other people that could benefit from it. And then you show me how it's going to benefit 4 other people in the department or across departments, and I can, get somebody to help me pay for it, then I can go for it. So I think it's really important to be strategic about the kinds of things you ask for the moon and the kinds of things you're willing to settle for. And I think having that, almost broken down, these are the things that are absolutely essential to my success. If you don't give them to me, I can't come. These are the things that I'd like to have and they would be useful, but I could kind of negotiate a little bit. And then these are the things that basically I'm going to ask you, and if you say no, I don't really care. I'm just, negotiating now. And I have the same thing in mind. There are things when we hire people, we want them to be successful. It's crazy and really insane to hire somebody and not give them what they need to be successful. The difference is need versus want. So we can usually agree on need, and then the negotiating is about want.
Yeah, I would second that. I think it's, if you're starting out, especially as junior faculty, it's like what you need to be successful, to think very critically about that, and thinking about, oh my gosh, if I had X amount of grad students that I knew could help me, or a postdoc, or protected time over X amount of years, so I don't have to maybe teach as much if I'm really focused on research. All of that, I think, will just accelerate your career and get you on stable footing sooner, so that all these other things can come into play. And I think that's invaluable. That's invaluable to the institution, valuable to you, and it's going to create success for you. I think without those sort of supports in place, that's where it can be a little bit tenuous.
So I think startup packages are tricky because they're wildly different depending on your field, right? And so some fields, they need that $400,000 piece of equipment. Other people do surveys. And so there's no equipment cost to their research, but man, it would be really helpful to have students that help them, or protected time, course releases for a number of years, or even a slush fund of money that I can spend however I need to in order to do pilot studies to get NIH grants, right? And so all of these things are negotiable. The trick is knowing what to ask for. And I think it's really smart to, talk to as many people as possible about it before you start interviewing for jobs. So talk to your mentor about it. Talk to all of your friends who have recently gotten jobs about it, and talk to people at conferences about it in terms of, well, what did you ask for, and what do you wish you had asked for, and what did you ask for that you actually never ever used? Because I asked for a couple of things that I never actually ended up using in my research because it went a different direction. So I think gathering as much information as you can about the range of possibilities, and then, like you said, put it all on the table, but certainly know what's critical, what's a wish, and what's like, oh, that'd be kind of nice, and have that category in mind so that you can also offer things to put on the negotiation table if they're like, well, something's got to go from this list. You can say, all right, I know what needs to go, these items.
Okay, thank you guys. 6:30, so we're gonna end it up here, but if you would please give our panelists a round of applause. And we certainly appreciate y'all coming out here for the student colloquium. We hope you guys got something. At the beginning, we handed you a small survey. If you could fill that out to help us kind of gauge what was good about this and what we can do next year to help you guys out. But thanks you guys for coming. Enjoy the conference, and as always, when you see people around, go say hello, let them know your name, introduce yourself, and that type of stuff. And that's going to be the best way for you guys to really network with people and find out what postdocs are available, what jobs are available, or what's hot in the industry that people are looking for. So again, thank you panelists, thank you students for coming, and enjoy the rest of the conference.